currently teaching at the International Academy of Astrology, right? Being a writer, a researcher and teacher, his expertise, I'd say, is probably Hellenistic, right? Hellenistic.
Traditional call, if I could, that we honour the sacred earth that we're standing on and acknowledge the traditional custodians of our great land. I'd also like to dedicate this talk, as I did in December at the FAA, with the AA New South Wales, to our wonderful and dearly loved friend, Ed Tamplin.
Yeah.
As you all know, Ed was associated with SARS for many, many years, and he was a great mate of mine, and I wrote an article which was published in the FAA about our friendship. So I'd just like to acknowledge that, because Ed and I would have been all over tonight's talk. Having said that, delve into many different things. I'd just like to point out that in 2017 I wrote an article that was published in American NCGR about 2020 and what we can expect from the 2020 decade. So this kind of has a little bit of that first. I'll just go through a little bit of that, and then we'll diverse ourselves into some bushfires for Australia, and then we'll have a little look at, I've got the chart there for the coronavirus and many other things, but we'll just see where we go. So appearing in a great theatre near you, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and a crafty rat. This is the year of the rat. You know the crafty rat. You all know the story of the zodiac of the Chinese, and how the race was there was a race, and the old crafty rat jumped on the back and was first there, across the river. And of course the river is our sky. So, the quality and quantity of life on the blue planet is shifting. Air and all of its attributes associated within will be ushered to the stage. That's the 2020s. We're moving into the air. And any of you who attended my 2020 40 days and 40 nights, the Aquarium March, would have seen a lot more of what we're going through today. How will you integrate the fixed solid changes? That's for all of us, not just as a globe, but personally ourselves. I've mentioned many times that no one astronomical or astrological occurrence stands alone. Okay? So multiplicity of life is governed by the diversity of construct. So in other words, there's the sky, because I teach astronomy for the International Academy as well. So the sky itself underpins astrology. So astrology by its very nature is a model based on astronomy. If we accept that astronomy underpins astrology, then astrology is preordained by the astronomy's very order. And as such, our collective and our own individual stories lie within that complexity. So astrology is hence mathematical, grammatical, and Rob's here to give me the grammatical, and geometrical. My pronunciations at times are left to be desired. Organic life here on the blue planet, we call home for now, is complex and is a reflection of the multiplicities of the solar system and beyond. As we are making the transition from the past centuries' Earth conjunctions, okay, so you all know what that means? Okay, so we're moving into the 2020s and into air because we have what's called the Great Conjunctions. And those Great Conjunctions generally run between 180 years and 220 years, depending on the signs, we give it an average of 200 years. So every 20 years, we have a Great Conjunction, which we're going to have this year in December, right on the solstice, on December 21st, 22nd of 2020. Jupiter and Saturn will join together in the air sign of Aquarius. That will be marking, in some ways, the archetype, if you like, of Aquarius. Because following that, then we have Pluto in 2023. go through that a little bit later. So we also have the nodes changing as well into the North Node will be going into Gemini, out of Cancer where it's been, which has been pretty predominant for Australia and any country that has association with Cancer, and we do, the sign Cancer. As we move from the past centuries of Earth conjunctions, where agriculture was 80% of human workforce, and into the two-based numbers digits, because that was part of what my talk on 2020 was about, and the article I wrote in 2017 actually said at SARS in 1999 that when we moved from the 1 digit to the 2 digit, because we've been writing the 1 digit, okay, 19 such and such, or 18 such and such, 17 such and such, the Western world within that context, and now we're sort of global, it's a dominant archetype. So we now have the 2. So every time you write at the end date, the collective is ushering in this 2 digit. And so the manifestation of that is, of course, 2 is associated with water and Cancer, the moon. And so all of those things, and in 1999 I said, it's funny coming from a fisherman, that the most precious resource on Earth as we move into the 2000 and the new millenniums would be water. And that has turned out to be pretty much the way it has. Anyone that wants to see that article, it is on my website, on gregoryclaire.com. If you scroll down, I think it's on World Affairs, and you scroll down, you'll see that article. And that'll inform you a lot more.
Greg, why is 2 associated with water?
Because it is the moon's number.
The moon rules the tides.
Yeah, but I didn't know the connection between the moon and 2, that's all.
Oh, right. Well, the moon is, the sun is 1, the moon is 2, Jupiter is 3, Mars is 4, some use Uranus, and then 5 is Mercury, and then 6 is Venus, and 7 we sort of give to Neptune, or we can give to, it's the walking stick, and then 8 is Saturn, and 9 sometimes is associated with Pluto or Mars, that kind of energy. But I wouldn't put it there because the reason I wouldn't put it there with the 9 is the 9's a special number. It's a Pythagorean number that has special qualities to it. It's very humanistic in its context, and so it's humanitarian. And I don't think we could probably associate that with Pluto or Mars. Even though planet Earth, on your periodic tables, the bottom is iron. What's the Earth? A core of melted iron. This is where the principles of astrology's archetypes come from, and they will manifest through the eons of time. And when it came to the Greeks in the Hellenistic period, you had Plato dealing with all this grammatical, if you like, wording to bring the archetypes out. He was our first psychologist, if you like to call it that. Okay, so 2 decades, the 2020, the blue-green planet Earth will bear witness to, first, Mars conjunct Saturn in March, we'll look at that, in Aquarius at 00 degrees of Aquarius. This adherence is known as the freedom fighter, the revolutionary movement mobilised. Now, in that article on the website, you'll see how I've said that egalitarian groups, that was in 2017, remember, they said they would unite themselves and start to show themselves around the planet. Well, I'm pretty sure they've done that already.
Yeah.
Okay. This will then be followed by the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at 00 degrees of Aquarius on December 22nd, the solstice. And once again, Mars and Saturn pattern will repeat again on the 4th of April 2022. This will be further along in Aquarius. And Mars at that time will be at the bending of the nodes. And the node will be Scorpio, okay? Taurus, Scorpio. And for those who don't know what the bending of the nodes are, when the planet that rules the node gets to 90 degrees from that sign, it's called the bending, and it's a crisis. Okay? It's like anything that gets at 90 degrees is always a square, and it's a crisis. And so we've got, this is why this theme is a continuous theme through 2020. Finally, Pluto will cross the wavy lines, that's Aquarius. Anyone that doesn't understand what wavy lines are, because I do write in cipher at times. In 2023, Pluto will go into Aquarius. That's why I've said that this decade of 2020s is predominantly air and associated with Aquarius. So, signals, Pluto's reaching the outer limits of our declination. I don't want to get too strong on this, but the idea is that planets come into the Earth's geocentric view, because we view the universe from the Earth, because we live on the Earth. We're not heliocentric. We know the sun, as the ancients did, that we go around the sun, but we view everything from Earth. And so if you go outside and look up at the night sky, that's what you see. So when Pluto comes in, he'll be on the outer bounds of that declination. You might have heard the term outer bounds moon at different times. When planets go outside of the Earth's plane, and the Earth's plane is our axis, which is 23, 26. That's the degree of the Earth. It's not up like this, it's like this, going around the sun, like this. You might have learned that at school. So the whole idea is that every now and then, so you have, and these go back, way back to the Sumerian times, the Sumerians, the Assyrians, I should say, understood that there was declination, and that's where your gods Er and Anu come from, because they're the Tropic of Cancer, the equator, and the Tropic of Capricorn. And so when a planet gets outside of that, which they don't do very often, and you won't get the social divide planets, which are Jupiter and Saturn, they rule social issues. It's only generally the inner planets that do that, and some of the extreme planets. It depends on their plane, what we call their plane. However, it's important to understand that when a planet is out of bounds, then it's not in touch with us. Okay? It's left the earthly things behind. So it has it produces an archetype of its own. And that's what we call a wild card. It's kind of like this energy that doesn't have the collective social in its mind. So when we talk about Jupiter and Saturn, we're talking about we're under the rules and regulations of Saturn and the direction of Jupiter. And that's why those two planets don't. Because the ecliptic, which I've said many times to systemize students, the ecliptic itself is what we call the road of consciousness. So that's why eclipses are very important, because what happens when there is an eclipse, both a total solar eclipse or eclipse of any, generally eclipse of any type, but when it's a total solar eclipse, the moon and the sun, and the moon meets, because the moon has a 5-degree plane tilt, so every time there's a new moon or a full moon, you don't get an eclipse, because the moon might be above the ecliptic or below the ecliptic. But when there's an eclipse, they both line up. The consequences of that is that the energy, if you like, or the archetype is released onto the ecliptic. That degree becomes an ignition point for the unconscious. So as Jung might say, and Hillman, or James Hillman might say, that the idea here is the collective archetype of that planet is deposited on the ecliptic, and that's an unconscious archetype, and it's taken up from there. And every time planets go past that, they kind of pick up that flavour of that archetype. And individuals that have their charts close to those degrees or on those degrees are the agents for change. And so they bring on that consciousness. Okay? So you heard that from me. Not many people talk about that. Okay. Where we take personal responsibility for the action of the past, which placed us here at the gates of Hades, that's what Pluto will signify, because there's also two things happening at the moment. I'll get through this little bit. Don't go too deep on it. The idea here is that on February 6th and February 12th this year, both Saturn and Jupiter will cross the ecliptic on their nodes, south nodes. Okay, so every planet has a node. The moon has a node, planets have nodes. That's the social release again of this archetypal energy. When Pluto first got discovered, all planets, outer planets, got discovered, especially Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus. They got discovered when they were on the ecliptic. Because if you're an astronomer and you're looking up in the sky, you need them on the ecliptic to take your best pictures of the night sky. And so Pluto got discovered in 1930 at 00 degrees of latitude on the ecliptic, almost bang on the time across the ecliptic. And so it crossed its north node ascending up. This is the line that planets make across the ecliptic. Imagine the ecliptic as a curved line, and this is the way planets go. As they go around the sun, they're up and down like this. What's that remind you of?
Aquarius.
No. What's it look like?
Oh, the serpent.
Aha! We got it. The serpent, the snake, the dragon. The dragon. Hence the Chinese with their dragons. This association. This is what happens, and that's why the ecliptic. You're hearing this quote. If you're writing this stuff down, make sure you quote me, because this is the first time that anyone's given this information. This is the Sydney Astrological Research Society. I pride myself on delivering new information to you each time. So, the archetype of Aquarius, social engineering, the air sign, is an image of the water bearer, pouring knowledge, edification into the immeasurable cosmic mystic waters of Pisces, the two fishes. Aquarius is said to be scientific, humanitarian, some say revolutionary. Ancient authors add betrayers of opinion and truth. Plato suggests in his allegory of the cave, shadows of illusion. Another one term that comes from astronomy, you might have heard antisha. It's a shadow, because as the sun, when we're at the equinoxes at midday, the sun casts no shadow. However, as the Earth then moves around and travels around in its seasonal path around, the sun moves slightly north or south, depending on where it's going. So that creates a shadow at midday. After midday, you get a shadow. That shadow faces north or south, depending on where you are. That's the idea of the shadow of illusion. The waters or scientific manipulators standing on the planet, on the planks above the prisoners, keeping us shackled inside a world of illusion. Okay? I suggest not unlike the current illusion of consumerism. The arc of the preposterous, the great mercurial illusion, is on the stage now. We have seen it in the United States. We have seen it here in Australia. What is the phrase everybody uses now? Fake news. Who is news? The town choir. Mercury delivers the news. This is a mercurial trickster, and Plato wrote about this too. Why is Mercury the trickster? Because Mercury never moves more than, at its most extreme, 28 degrees from the sun. In other words, he can't get up in the sky. You can't see Mercury unless you're a fisherman like me, or an astronomer or a photographer that goes out and takes it. And if you take away astronomical daylight from it, you only get 7 degrees at maximum for Mercury to rise above the horizon in the dawn sky or the evening sky. And so he's a trickster. 1 minute you see him, the next minute you don't. And he does all these loops and stuff. That's why it's important to understand our language of astrology comes from astronomy. When you understand astronomy, you'll understand, all you have to do then is learn archetypes and you put it together. So, the arc of the preposterous, the great mercurial illusion, biodata in the clouds. Power is now in the hands of data collection, Amazon, Alibaba and so on. Online giants, the great surveillance we see inherent in China now. The collection and storage is Saturn, and collection is the moon, data is Mercury. Science is now replacing evolution by intelligent design. Evolution of the future is not by the gods of the sky, but by intelligent design by the gods of the clouds. Biodata is the most valuable resource on this planet. This is air. This is what you have to understand, that the archetype of air is that's why I said in the opening, all the attributes of air. Think of all those archetypes that you learned about air, because that's the wavy lines, you know. Okay, so what happens when your data's hacked? To expand our understanding of Aquarius, I'll just go on a little bit more and then we'll get into some astrology. To understand the archetype of Aquarius, we need to go back to the Greek mythology. And so the Greek mythology suggests that the urn full of magical ambrosia belonging to the gods was spilled down to earth. And those who witnessed it saw the sacred fluid as a flow of divine knowledge. However, the culture, astronomical, distant archetype portrayal of Aquarius may not be as quiet as poetic as something vintage. One Greek version has Ganymede, the handsome adolescent slave captured by the sovereign of the gods, Zeus, Jupiter. Zeus is said to have swooped down from the sky in the form of an eagle and snatched Ganymede to make his own. Ganymede becomes Zeus's personal cupbearer, and as the story unfolds, the boy finds slavery unbearable and decides to pour the sacred fluid or ambrosia, the god's external honey, refusing this sacred fluid. He pours it out. He's had enough of it. Can you get where this is going? This is another falsity. Okay, this is slavery. This is what I'm talking about. This is Plato's illusion, and this is what Aquarius, the archetype, gets its back up against. It's the revolutionariness in that context. The legend says that the sacred water fell to earth, causing the inundation of 40 days and 40 nights. And of course, we know that Venus came out of that. She emerged, in the Greek myths, she emerged out of the water because of the Gaia and Uranus. They kind of got together and the sperm fell to earth and
Saturn shot his genitals.
Yeah. Well, Uranus is, and then Jupiter took it. The Titans, as we call it, the gods. But there's something in these stories. You know, we read these mythological stories, but these are archetypes. And I know I'll mention this work several times tonight, but it's important for us to understand that astrology is a linguistic skill, if you like, to understand and produce the grammar that we need to put our message out there. Because when we just say or read these mythological stories, are we really getting the essence of that story? It's important to sort of rely on that. And so the legend says the sacred water fell to earth, causing rains for 40 days and 40 nights, creating a massive flood that covered the entire world. Aquarius in antiquity was spoken of as a water sign, although they expressed it as an air sign. Traditionally, Aquarius is under the stewardship of Saturn, and as such, a very different story emerges from the modern correspondence of Uranus. Aquarius opposes the light of the sun-ruled Leo and is described as cold wind-swept, dark by temperament, fixed and rigid. Heracleides, fire of the cosmic internal change, light projects shadows. So what we're talking about here again is this whole idea is, and in that article, the full article here that's on my website about 2020, the idea of this is that you need to kind of feel your way through that the modern concept of Uranus ruling Aquarius, it might have attributes or correspondence to Aquarius, but the archetype has been carried through century after century by Saturn. So we have to understand that in that context. So here, ignorance hides under the icy sea, awaiting the warmth of the sun to break the tradition of winter. The urn of Minos, from which flowed the wrath of the navy, revenged by the wavy lines, the upright walking king, man, this is a science, remember. The people of science and exploration are the exalted ones of the cup of knowledge. However, on their way to achieving this, the Black Pearl encounters pirates upon the windswept sea. That's my little bit for tonight, to give you a little bit of. It's just a little. Is that double ring?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
A
the
little bit of number 2.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
On the shadow of Mercury.
Yeah.
Okay, so it kind of gives you the whole idea of how things work, and why they're placed like that is, of course, what's called the Chaldean order, or the 7 zones of the planets, because down here the moon moves swiftest, and then Mercury, then Venus, and then the Sun, Mars, Jupiter and Saturn. That's the speed of the planets. And they're the archetypes. So the numbers are also associated within the archetype. You remember my opening remarks there. No one thing stands alone. Just like on Earth and as we see within the solar system and in our own lives every day, the complexity of astronomy is sort of shown through the complexity of astrology. And there we are, the only blue planet that we know of yet. We've had those telescopes out there for a while, and all those little satellites up there and space missions and Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 and all that, and they've broken through and gone miles out into space and everywhere else, but we haven't found any other organic life. Doesn't mean that we won't find other life. It just means the blue planet here we call, or we made the word through grammar and call it organics. Okay, so when we're doing mundane astrology, and I'm not going to have this up there for long, and if you take a picture of this or you try and record this, it belongs to me. It's what I teach in my classes. And it gives you an idea of what you're looking for if you're looking for understanding mundane astrology, which is global affairs. And that's one of the things that I do, is I give prognostication on mundane affairs. And so if we are looking for the stock exchange or the house, the lower house or Congress, 11th house. That's basically how it works. The ruling powers up there, foreign affairs is in the 9th, blah, blah, blah. Okay, the zodiac, the ecliptic, the assignment of the zodiac, the collective, unconscious images and archetypes. Do you like my picture of my wave? In my early days, way in there. And so this is kind of, I spoke to you about the collective unconscious and the archetypes. I told you how they manifest. So, and this is a little bit more of it. This is, I run astronomy classes, it's called NAT5, the International Academy, you need to join the International Academy and go through there, or at least set their exams before you can come into my Nat 5 class to do astronomy and other bodies, where you learn all this stuff that I've been talking about. However, I also teach a diploma in Hellenistic astrology, and anyone can do that online. I'm having the semester off now, but the next classes start in April, and so I take people through and teach them Hellenistic astrology. And part and parcel of this is where your astrology comes from. Your astrology isn't just your modern form of astrology. Astrology has a deep connection, and it all makes sense. And this sort of makes sense of it, characteristics and archetypes, the zodiac signs, and how it's put. And here we have the Hellenistic idea of air rising, and we breathe air. So that's why it's on the ascendant here. And these are little quadranes here. So the third house to the 12th house is air. Then fire rises to the top and takes you across to Pisces. And then water falls to the earth. And then as the water falls to the earth, it then ferments. Okay, this is what the Egyptians did. Okay, this is why they built their pyramids. The base of the pyramids is earth. There's a whole gamut of information involved in all of this stuff. But you came here to see some astrology. The 9, 360, 9 is a Pythagorean special number. It has lots of specialties about it. Okay, so we want to know if astronomy and astrology can give us an answer to the recent bushfires in Australia, this last set of bushfires. As I said to you before, that the ecliptic is where things happen. That's where the unconscious energy is manifest and gets taken up. When we talk about mundane astrology, nations have charts, okay? And when we do charts for the nation, and when we do eclipse charts, we do them specifically for that place where you want to be, or to judge the chart from. And all my charts, or 90% of my charts, are in whole sign. They don't use what we call quadrant houses. Quadrant houses are based on, like most of you probably use the Placidus, and Placidus is a timing system, how long it takes for a sign to rise over the ascendant or to appear across the mid-heaven of the place. And then you have Regimentanus, which is aligned to the right ascension of the Earth. And so you get all of these different attributes when you press that little button on your computer, and what Koch or Regimentanus, Alcabitius, Placidus, all those things which are called quadrant houses. However, Hellenistic astrology understood that because they did Alcabitius and Porphyry anyway. But I use whole sign houses because it gives you the topics, and they're called the topical affairs of humans. And we're on planet Earth, and these are our topics. So this chart, this chart here that we have here for the swearing in chart, Australia became a nation, if you like, on the Federation chart. The Federation of all of Australia got together, and on the 1st of January 1901, at midnight in London, they granted us our right as an individual country. That time Melbourne was supposedly the capital, so you could use those charts. However, the celebration for the nation and the proclamation for the nation was made here in Centennial Park. And one of our long-time members who isn't here anymore, she's up there as a shining star, was Gwen Stoney. And Gwen Stoney gave us this chart. And I use this chart, and it's a very good chart, as you'll see later on. Our midheaven on this chart, and the midheaven represents that thing that's above you, and in the mundane astrology, that's the nation. That's how you see everything. You can't hide from the midheaven. It is the government, it is all those sorts of things. And the IC of the chart is called the home of the chart. Even though we have Cancer on and the moon ruling our 4th house, the IC of our chart, the thing that's down there, is Leo 2 degrees. And as you can see, that we'll move here to have a look. The 3rd of July, we had Saras 1, eclipses have numbers, they run in families for roughly 1,000 years. They have a family of eclipses. They run through the whole cycle. So Saras 1227, 3 north, duration 4 minutes of totality was 4 minutes 33 seconds, which equates to about 4 months and 15 days and 6 hours. Don't worry about that part of it, but it is there. And projected onto the ecliptic, the adherence of Mudbuster, the lion's paw. You can check that out later on. But what I wanted to show you was to have a look at what we have. Whoop, keep doing that. What I wanted to get out. Go back. I'm not used to this little guy here. What I want. Oh, I've got one more to go forward, haven't I? Is that the one? No. Back. There we go. What I wanted to show you, there's the ascendant, and the ascendant of an eclipse chart is very important, and so is its lord. What I want to show you is that it's 15 degrees of Gemini rising. And if you go to that chart that I showed you before, well, let's go forward. If you go to that chart here, you'll see we have Pluto here. Okay, so when an eclipse falls over the top of that, it's pretty strong. Okay, it's saying there's something very strong as well. Because the ascendant is our environment. Okay, that's our local environment. It dictates in some terms the place where you were born, but it also shows what the environment is going to be like. And you look at the lord of it. When I say the lord, that's the ruler. So Mercury is the ruler. So that in account, you can see that Mars sits over the top in conjunction on the IC in Leo. That's a fire sign. Mars is a fire archetype. The 4th house, or the IC, if you like, in that context, is of course our homeland. So our homeland is Mars burning. And it's theatrical as well because it's Leo. So it was on a grand scale by everybody. Leaders, people, everybody that spoke about the fires in their archetypal language were portraying that. I've never seen a fire so fierce. You look at Mercury. It is conjunct the IC. So Mars and Mercury were together. Mercury is associated with wind. Okay, in weather, that's what Mercury is. He's wind. And so you get the fire and the wind on our IC with Pluto, with the ascendant on our Pluto. Plus, if you look at the rest of the chart, you can see some very significant conjunctions that are there as well and aspects that are there. So, having said that, if we were to look at that chart, go back. If we were to look at that chart as a mundane astrologer cast, if you like, for here, you would have said straight away, if you looked at that chart and you looked at the ruler of the chart, which is Mercury, with Mars in the 3rd house. 3rd house is also local neighbourhoods. It's the states within the country as well, or wherever you are. So it shows the neighbourhoods. And so that's pointing to it. And also the conjunction of 10 degrees of Cancer. If you go to our Australia chart, you can see that Cancer rules. That's where that eclipse fell. It fell in our 4th house. Okay? And then, and it's opposite our sun, which is up here. And kind of, you can see how all that's played out. Now, eclipses don't just happen. They're lunation cycles. And I've got lots of them here for tonight for you. Lunation cycles are the most telling key that you could ever have as an astrologer. Every time there's a new moon, a new archetype is released, depending on the degree, the sign, what planets are involved with that, and they're on-rolling pictures that roll on and on and on. And as you saw back there before, I had a timing for that chart. We time the eclipses, and as you see, for how the energy is released. Okay, an eclipse generally lasts about an hour or a bit more, sometimes up to 2 hours, from the first Umbria touch, and then it goes over, maximises, and then it leaves the sun. And that turns into generally that an hour in time is a month. An hour in time is a year. A minute in time is a month. And your seconds become days and hours. So as you can see here, it was 4 minutes and 33, which is 4 months, 15 days and 6 hours. So that's the maximum release of that energy. So count 4 months from there. So right up to that maximum time, the first fire started in September, late September, and then they rolled through and were right through until, well, really now. And let's just have a look how that maximised itself. Because eclipses run, like when you have a new moon, a new moon total solar eclipse, you generally then get followed up in that lunation by a lunar eclipse. And here's the lunar eclipse. The lunar eclipse has Mars and Mercury over their ascendant, if you like, of here in Sydney, which we see as the place for the proclamation. So it's sort of saying Australia-wide, we are still we get the first initial hit, then we get a second hit of it. And so when we get that second hit of it, it's kind of like, oh my God, this is really going to be pretty dramatic. So that's how we would sum up, in some ways. There's a lot more to it. And if you look over there, you can see that over here we have in the house, you kind of look at this house here, which is the health house of Australia as well, or Sydney here as well. You have the moon just leaving Pluto, and you have Saturn here, Saturn on the node, Pluto and the moon in the 6th house. So the health, if you like, the health of the state, if you like, in here is you know, Pluto's retrograde, the node station, which is a symbolic thing that happens, and Saturn's retrograde. So all of these things combined speak the language of not a very nice particular time. Now the multiplicity of things that happen also are associated there. You can go through and look at all the other things. We had an election around May, and then we had all this other stuff happen right through that period of time. Right up into November, you had Scott Morrison getting into a lot of trouble. Remember that when we looked at the total solar eclipse, 10 degrees of Cancer was opposite the sun. The sun is the leader. And so you get this combination of things that are happening, and that's kind of how things went. And if we put it on the chart, we put the partial eclipse on the chart, again, there it is, down here on the IC. Mercury's retrograde this time on the IC with the Mars. And you can kind of see that things probably, and if you look at Uranus, Jupiter's retrograde on Uranus as well. So these were quick and swift fire, another fire sign. Then there are other things associated with the 9th house, which we will get to later on. Okay, so that's Australia. So that's the kind of thing that, as a prognostic astrologer, had I not been teaching and doing what I normally do with my associated publications, I would have said that. I missed that because I was in the midst of teaching several classes and everything else. I was normally writing up on my website, except last year I was so engaged in teaching that I missed it. I got asked a question at Christmas time, sitting around the table in my home in Iluka. So what's the answer for these bushfires? You know, someone's been a bit of a cynic. How did astrology miss that? I never looked. So I had to go and have a look. And that's what I can see. There's quite a lot of other stuff. If you people are familiar with progress charts, solar arc and all that sort of stuff, go and have a look at those too. There's plenty of stuff that was happening that people weren't saying. And at the same time, I was also dealing with a terrible situation with Ed and losing our wonderful friend Ed as well. So it was pretty dramatic. Okay, so the other thing that happened just recently at the end of November going into December was coronavirus. So the first release of coronavirus was on the 31st of December 2019, the first reported case in Wuhan. I've got the sunrise chart when you don't have an exact time when those things happen, or even when you're doing a chart for understanding a day and what's going to unfold on that day. You do what's called a sunrise chart. So you put the sun on the ascendant. And here you can see the sun, South Node and Jupiter are all on the ascendant in the sign of Capricorn. So that's kind of not real flash to have the South Node there. It is to have the sun there because that makes it very strong. But when the sun is conjunct with the node on a fixed star at 0 degrees of orb, then you've got a little problem. Fixed stars generally are nice, but some aren't to us. They've been the witnesses watching the Earth and its solar system evolve over billions of years. The stars have been up there. Our sun is a star. Our star is about 4 or 5 billion years that the Earth has been here. Our star sort of was about 1 billion before that. And kind of the whole idea of fixed stars are portals of light from past. When you look up in the sky and you see the star, right, that light you're looking at is millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of years old. Okay? So don't get too fanciful using orbs. They've got to be 0 or very close to it. Roughly 1 degree at maximum. I teach my students in astronomy. Lots of astrologers like to get excited and say, oh, I've got something conjunct such and such, so, you know, a fixed star like Regulus, like Mr. Trump has rising, 29 degrees of Leo. You know, that's a royal military star, you know, the great royal star of the line, the Sphinx in Egypt, you know. Some people say, oh, you know, I've got something at 26 degrees of Leo. You know, it's a little wide, don't get too fanciful. Stick to the zeros. But Phases is a nebula of stars. In other words, what that means is it's a whole group of new stars being born. They're all together, and it's not actually a star, it's a grouping of stars, and it's one of the, as it says up here, it's one of the brightest things that you can see. It's called M22 because it's in Sagittarius. It's in the, you know, our constellation that's up there. It's in the Archer. It sort of sits above the Archer. The Archer's got the thin bow pull. And so Phases has never been a good star. It causes blindness and violence, and, you know, it's one of those stars like Algol or Antares. It's had a bad rap. You know, whenever you get, well, through just empirical information, you know, people have seen that things happen when planets are conjunct Phases. So when Phases is rising with the South Node for the sunrise chart, it doesn't spell real well. And then you have, of course, everywhere around the world, you're going to have different places with different timings. So don't get too excited. Sometimes small districts, so this is for China. If you move this chart in longitude further along, you get a different chart. So this just happened to fall over the top of it. But you also got at that time happening the lot of Spirit. This guy's called Spirit, and so you have the moon going in Pisces, going to Neptune as well, and of course Mars is up here in Scorpio, and he will show up as something very prominent here in a minute. And so to understand how the coronavirus kind of got going, you've got to go back in the chart, and in the charts we go back and we use the ingress charts. The ingress chart is when the sun gets to one of the cardinal degrees. The cardinal degrees, of course, are east, then we have the north, and then we move from the north over to the west, and then we go to the south. Oh, it's doing it the wrong way. North, east, and then the south when we're looking up. So the cardinals are our seasons. Okay, that's what causes. If we didn't have a tool on the axis, we wouldn't have seasons. Okay, so when the sun gets to these points, that's when we cast charts for the quarter. But normally we would use the Aries chart to rule the whole year. So when the sun, astronomical and astrological birthday for everybody, is when the sun gets to its node. The Earth's node. Like I was talking about before, you don't hear any people talk about the Earth's node. Well, the Earth's node is when our celestial equator reaches that point in time where it crosses the ecliptic. And so that is the Aries ingress. Opposite the Aries ingress is the autumnal ingress, which we call the Libra ingress. So you do the charts for Aries ingress, Cancer ingress, Libra ingress, and Capricorn ingress. And so to find maybe where this started, because I listened to the research and there's quite a lot of stuff going on with all these virologists down in Melbourne, and they're talking about it's easy to get the data. And they said this had to have started slightly before, sometime around November. So I pulled up this chart here for Wuhan, and you can see here, again, this time I have a Reggimontanus chart, which is based on right ascension, which is the Earth's equator. You can see that Mars is at 23 degrees of Virgo conjunct the 8th house, the 8th house cusp. The 8th house represents endings and beginnings, and more endings than beginnings. You might be beginning a new life, it's the house of death. That's how we see the 8th house. Or that modern concept in humanistic words, the house of transformation. So we got Mars up there, so that's kind of telling us something. We got Saturn, the ruler of the ascendant, in the 12th house. 12th house is, of course, the house that rules those places where things aren't all that good either. It's hospitals and things like that. It kind of ties you up. And of course, it's in opposition to a moon that is down here in the 6th house. And the 6th house is our health. And so it's kind of saying to you, well, in this context, the health with the moon opposition Saturn, it's not very good for life. There's a lot more going on, but I'll move on and we'll see. And if we put the People's Republic chart of China, the 1st of October 1949 at 10:13, and that chart was the one I presented in America in 2012 at UAC. Prior to that, everyone's been using the 3 or 3:13 p.m. chart. However, as I showed in the evidence, which was published in the Mountain Astrologer, that I have a book written by Mal's physician who came from Sydney, and a whole article written on it from the Sydney Morning Herald. And on page, I think it's page 51, he says, I woke up with Mal at 5 o'clock in the morning, we all went down the river, had a swim, blah, blah, blah. 10 o'clock sharp, they walked onto the podium and the noise was electrical, blah, blah, blah. 13 minutes later, after it all settled down, I proclaimed the independence of China. That's the chart I use. And you can see here from that Libra ingress chart, you're getting a little bit of an idea what's happening. The MC's on the ascendant, Mercury is on Neptune. You can see that Pluto is coming to Pluto is coming to, it's retrograding there, but we'll see that it moves on to Jupiter. There's a whole lot of other stuff going on there in the chart, which I'll show you a little how, not one chart, but all charts, just like I showed you in the bushfire chart when you have a lunation solar eclipse and then you have a partial solar eclipse, the same thing enforcing the same pattern. And here we'll see that the Capricorn ingress, which is basically when this virus had got kind of worked along, we looked at that chart, and again we have this fixed star, which is not a very good fixed star, but 0, 0 degrees of all, 29 degrees such and such of Pisces is shear. Some people call it sheared. Because of what? It's kind of not a nice star either, you know. So when you get these fixed stars rising, like I showed you with the faces and shear, it's a pretty big strong statement in astrology terms, especially as a mundane astrologer. You sort of go, well, you know, pay attention. Something, you know, something's unfolding. Work with the archetypes and see what happens. Of course, it's 30 minutes from turning into Aries, and Chiron's here, and of course Mars, the ruler, is over here in the 8th house again, in Scorpio. Important to see this Scorpio thing, because where did the coronavirus happen? Where did it generate from?
Wild animal.
Yeah, but if you do the research, you'll find it was contaminated water. Species of contaminated water they find that went back to the fish market. Okay, they still haven't found the source, but they found it in the water there. In other words, the water. What do we describe Scorpio as? Poisonous water. Okay, that's the archetypal term that we would use for it. A virus will grow. Okay, so, and look at Jupiter. Jupiter's at 4 degrees of Scorpio, of Capricorn. It's interesting to watch what happens here in a second as well. So, then when we put that chart over the top of the People's Republic of China, we start to see a few more things giving us some alarm bells as well. We see a Scorpio moon that has risen. We see that Mars is on the midpoint of Venus and the ascendant. We have Pluto now moved to the Jupiter. So this is the provinces, or the provinces, if you like, the neighbouring states in China. So there's quite a bit going on there, and one of the glaring ones for me was also, you mightn't understand the lot of spirit, but Neptune on the lot of spirit is describing something as well, which I won't go into here because I teach that in the Hellenistic class. However, on the 26th of December, we have these eclipses again, because eclipses run in families of dates. So 172 days apart are the eclipses because they're associated with the nodes. Okay, so as I showed you the Cancer eclipse and the fires in Australia, now we're looking for a key for the coronavirus. And so then we look at the eclipse here for Wuhan, and we can see 4 degrees here of Capricorn up here in the midheaven, Saturn on the midheaven. Never a good thing in a city when you've got Saturn on your MC. It's kind of like, oh, okay, you've got the old man up there, he's not very nice, he's got the umbrella out. And again, we have Mars over here in the 8th house, showing up in the 8th house again. 3 charts, Mars in the 8th house. This time he's at Scorpio 24. He's ruling the ascendant this time. A complete, what you would call in astrology, inconjunct, a quincunx to the ascendant, out of the 8th house. Kind of not nice when you do an event chart to see the ruler of the ascendant in the 8th house. It's in aversion. That's the word we use. So it's not very, very nice. Okay. And of course the 6th house of health is over here with Mercury. And Mercury is up here at 25 degrees of Sagittarius in the 9th house. Okay, so then we move on, we put it on the People's Republic chart, and look what happens. If my chart, that chart that I use for the Republic of China, I've done this many a times, there it is, Mars, bang on the ascendant for that chart. So that poisonous water, Mars in Scorpio, and what is the disease? The virus.
What is it?
It heats you up, causes fever, Mars, okay? So you get this whole idea of, and as I said before, it came out of the fish market, it came out of the dirty water, it came out, it's come from
the fish
water.
market, not the animal market.
No, the fish market is where it's traced back to, according to the virologist in the Melbourne University down where they're doing all the cloning and everything. It was traced, and that comes from RN, from the health report, from Ron Williams.
Yeah.
It came from the water, and they still can't find out where in the water it's come from. But it turned up in the fish markets, traceable through the water. It was the live market, yeah. But there you go. See, we have here the Mars bringing that to the ascending. So that kind of brings the 8th house around to China, ascending. And what do we get up here? We get China's 9th house is ruled by the moon. The moon is in Aquarius, but look, that eclipse, and remember this is an eclipse, solar annual eclipse. That just means that the sun and moon, it's furthest away. The moon's at its apogee, so it's furthest away from the furthest away, so it can't cover the disk of the sun. So when there's a total solar eclipse, if it's at its apogee, at its perigee, then it'll cover the full disk of the sun. And our moon is moving away like in millennium's time, our moon will be so far away from us, we'll always be having annual eclipses and not solar eclipses. Just another fact. But, look. It's a pretty telltale sign when you have in your 3rd house, which is your neighbourhood and provinces, opposite the 9th house, Uranus, bang on it. That's a pretty telling sign, you know, that's pretty strong language. So I'm not making any of this up. The astronomy is showing us, and we then convert the symbols, if you like, the fonts, the symbols, into our language, and that's what we get. So I was not surprised when I went looking at the data. So that kind of gives us the rundown on the virus. So then, of course, the continuation of why Australia is also involved here. You can see that Mercury over the top of the Jupiter and in the 9th house. So we kind of have this thing with China, you know, all these 250,000 students that come over here to study, you know, Mercury and Jupiter in Sagittarius kind of says study, you know, so it's you can unfold the language of the chart and see that, and then you can see that the south node's over our Saturn. This is kind of the politics that come into it as well, you know, the salesman, Scott ScoMo, what they call him now?
Scotty
Scotty from marketing. He's under a bit of pressure at the present time because the south node's on the Saturn, you know, all this action over the mid-heaven, and the sun is him, the government is the Saturn, and so they've been having an opposition as well. There's been a lot going on in that context. So you get that kind of play off as well, and so that's the solar eclipse. Now, if you time that solar eclipse, because that only happened in December. So you have to time that solar eclipse. How long was that solar eclipse? And that unfolds. So what happens is, that's why I made the mention there earlier on as I said, no one astrological thing is a standout. There is a roll-on of time, and the lunation cycles do that. You get lunation cycles, new moon, full moon, then new moon, full moon, new moon, full moon, new moon, solar eclipse, lunar eclipse. You get these triggers, and they land, as I said earlier on, they land on the ecliptic, the eclipses. They unfold their energy, and that's what happens. That's my take on our astrology. That's how I see it as it unfolds.
I'm sorry, Dave, what's that asteroid next to Saturn up on the top?
That's Ceres. That's where you sit around and have lunch. She's the goddess of bringing everybody together, food and banquets and
Grains.
grains and things like that. Yeah, Ceres was, of course, Demeter, or as we say, you know, cereal. Yeah, and so she's up there with Saturn. So we've been having wheat droughts and all this sort of stuff as well. So, you know, I could spend hours giving you all the archetypes and unfolding the whole lot of how this plays out. But I'm just trying to give you a rundown on what happened. And then, of course, we had a lunar eclipse, because that's eclipse season. We have a lunar eclipse, and this is the lunar eclipse for us. And it's for Sydney. And you can see that Mars is in Sagittarius in our 12th house. It's kind of like brought the virus into our 12th house. Where are these people being held at the moment? Offshore detention centre. What's an offshore?
To justify all that money.
That is the offshore detention centre. That's where your refugees are found as well.
Exile.
Exile. That's right. And so that kind of gives you a bit of an idea. And look where this eclipse. Yeah, look at this. The 24 degrees. All this Capricorn stuff here, opposite to the moon over here. The hysteria that's broken out about all of the, you know, people getting up, walking away with a Chinese person or an Asian person walks in the room or something. You know, it's Capricorn in that context of its archetype. If it's not manifest in the way that it should be, as I said to you before, things are unconscious until we make them conscious. And we make a conscious decision within ourselves to promote that better part of the archetype. And what we're seeing here is a manifestation of the worst of the archetype coming out. And that's what you generally find in mundane astrology. Once I started learning mundane astrology and understanding the archetypes, I just went, mundane astrology is so easy. It's easier than natal astrology, because natal astrology is the complexity of your life. But mundane astrology just stands out. It just tells you what nations are doing, what politics are doing.
Well, also, the Jupiter, the 12th lord in the first house, the massive financial losses through universities.
Yep, very good. And the idea of what we call the quality and quantity of the planets. Jupiter in Capricorn is in its fall or depression. That's what we call it. It's exalted in Cancer because it brings rain. And so Cancer, the idea of Cancer and ruled by the moon, is this beautiful fresh rain. And they call it God's sperm, Zeus's sperm. That's what made life. That's what the Greeks called Jupiter, the Lord of the sky. And he's exalted in Cancer because the moon rules Cancer, and it gives you children or childbirth. And it's only fresh water and air that we survive on here. So there's a whole context of how the language of astrology actually fits in. It's not, and so Jupiter in fall, when a planet is in its fall, I usually say it's away from home. When you're overseas and you try to get something from home, how easy is it? It's not that easy. So it puts obstacles in front of you, and that's why they use the term fall or depression. So when planets are in those signs, of their fall, they don't manifest the best side of things. They make it difficult for us. And then we have that chart over the Australia chart. And again, you can see that that has fallen here in our fourth house, and we still have that low Capricorn stuff. And look where the Mars is, it falls up here in our ninth house. So we have it in the aerial chart for New South Wales in the 12th house, but then when we place it on the Australia chart, it turns up in the 9th house. So it's kind of telling you the 9th house is all about foreign travel and people that come from overseas and philosophy and all those sorts of things. But that gives you the indication of what's happened there in that context. Okay, so what else have I got here? Then so now what I'm going to, how's Tom go?
It's 20 past 8, 10.
Okay, I'll try and get 10. Okay, so forecast for this year is hard to do in a couple of minutes. But to give you some idea of what you should be looking at, okay, to help you along the lines. On February 9th, we had a Leo full moon at 20 degrees, okay? You've got to cast the charts for your own charts or for the nation's charts to work out what's going on. If you've got degrees around 20 degrees of Leo, I could cast all those charts, but I haven't got time to be able to do that for you here. And then on February 24th, we have a Pisces new moon at 4 degrees of Pisces. So at 4 degrees of Pisces, we have a new moon. On the 9th of March, we have a full moon at 19 Virgo. And on the 17th, hang on, take the March out for a second. On the 17th of February to March the 11th, Mercury goes retrograde. So on the 17th of February, Mars goes retrograde at 12 Pisces and ends up at 28 Aquarius. So that's the period there. Now, of course, Mercury in retrograding in Pisces, Mercury is in his fall when he's in Pisces. He's scattered. Mercury wants to go to Virgo where he's exalted because he wants to get down in the nitty-gritty and do what he does. Put all the facts down, tell you everything. Look after your health. Okay, so the Aries ingress, that's the one that's up here. What's rising? What's rising? 9 degrees of Cancer. Remember what we had there before? 10 degrees of Cancer, we had a total solar eclipse before, way back. That solar eclipse was going to last for a year or more. So we had the 10 degrees of Cancer, and then we had the eclipse in December, and so that was Capricorn, the opposite. Now the Aries return has 9 degrees 16 rising, and so all these issues are going to come back again. They're not. All these issues were arisen in from that July eclipse will reoccur in that constellation Sun. So there's our opposition coming. Do we see something happening here within the sense of the opposition as well, rising? March the 22nd, we have Saturn makes its first appearance into Aquarius. Okay? So it'll make its first appearance into Aquarius. It'll go on until the 2nd of July, on March the 22nd, Saturn enters 0 degrees of Aquarius. It again gets to that 0 degrees because it's retrograde on the 2nd of July. And it will be conjunct Jupiter, there will be a conjunction of Jupiter, Mars and Pluto in Capricorn. Okay? Not a nice, it's all right if you want to be forceful. You want to get out there, it's an agricultural sign. You want to get out there and plough the field. March the 24th, we have an Aries new moon at 4 degrees of Aries. The 31st of March is the freedom fighter. So on the 31st of March, we have the conjunction of Mars and Saturn at 0 degrees of Aquarius, signalling the first of the air attributes that are going to take us into 2020. not a nice conjunction. A good conjunction, well, let's see what happens with Iran, Syria and all those places, because these are the freedom fighters. And they were started under the Aquarian, I think it was 12 degrees Aquarius with Mars conjunct the Sun. And that first Syrian stuff happened way back in 2000 and wherever. It's been going for 7 years now or something. April the 8th, we have an 18 degrees full moon. Oh no, so I said the 31st of March, Mars-Saturn conjunction. From March the 11th to the 25th, all the planets will be direct. So you know how you have planets retrograde? All the planets will be direct from the 11th to the 25th.
Of March.
Yeah, so that's really interesting to watch because they're all going to be bidding their archetype. All their archetypes are going to be forceful. They're going to be predominantly active is the correct word for it.
So do you think that's more unpredictable?
It is more unpredictable. Especially just after you've had Mars-Saturn conjunction. And then Libra, 18 degrees full moon, opposite the Sun's exaltation degree, and 9 Cancer is rising. Yeah, again, 9 Cancer rising. There's the Saturn conjunction in our 12th house.
Yeah.
Interesting. There's a whole lot more going on. You can see there the moon on the node. Neptune on the ascendant. Yes, Robert. Neptune on the ascendant. Are we going to turn from the land of fires to the land of floods?
That's March.
That's right.
I read somewhere.
With a Cancer moon on the node.
What did you say, Cancer's water, look at all that Pisces?
Yeah. It's trying to help them along, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be said about what's going on there. So and there's the event chart. So there's Australia's chart. Look where the Mars and Saturn end up.
Income.
It's not our fire.
MC.
No, is it?
It'll be right.
Yeah, and of course the lot of fortune. Okay, lot of fortune is the physical manifestations of the moon. So what happens to us in the way of our fortune via the moon. And so that's sitting over Chiron. Right over Chiron, in the 9th house. Okay, let's move on a bit more. April the 20th, event chart, Beijing. Oh yeah, this is Beijing. Okay, look at all these Capricorn planets rising again.
Sorry, what was the event on the 1st of April?
1st of April,
Mars, Saturn.
Mars-Saturn conjunction.
Oh, okay.
Mars-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. And then for Beijing, for China, it has Jupiter, Pallas, and Pluto all ascending. And of course, Pallas is the, all know who Pallas is. She's the voice, she's the political warrior. She's the voice for political things that go on politically. And Mercury's conjunct the Neptune there in the 3rd house. Yeah, okay.
There's a fixed star there too?
Yeah, there's fixed stars there too. And if you put that over the Republic of China, you'll see that. Very interesting. I brought this up in 2012. I'm sitting back going, oh, here we go. In America, in UAC, I presented all of this stuff that you're seeing and the Mars conjunction and said, watch what happens in China. Okay, so the Libra full moon. So then on the 23rd of April, we got a Taurus new moon at 3 degrees of Taurus. Who knows what 3 degrees of Taurus is?
Exaltation.
Exaltation of the moon.
And you've got Uranus in
Yes.
Yeah.
Conjunct Uranus. Haven't got it there. Don't think I've got the chart. Have I? No, it's going to be a new moon on Uranus. stock market. 3 degrees Taurus rules the stock market. Uranus has gone into Taurus, and it has been at 2 degrees such and such since Christmas time. Has anyone watched what the stock market's done?
Yep.
Up and down.
It's just Uranus is sitting there. May, the node shifts, huge. The nodes come out of Cancer and go into Gemini, Sagittarius, so the North Node will be in Gemini. The chart for Sydney for the nodal shift, exactly on the nodal shift, we'll have the MC at 10 degrees of Cancer. And the IC will be 10 of Capricorn. That's the Australia chart. Okay, 7th of May, we have 17 degrees of Scorpio full moon. May the 11th to the 17th, Saturn retrogrades and Jupiter retrogrades. May the 13th, 21 degrees Gemini, Venus retrogrades. Who knows what 21 degrees of Gemini is? America's Mars, Trump's sun. America's Mars is 21 degrees of Gemini. That's why Donald Trump, and it sits on their 7th house, on their descendant, your open enemies. You know, Donald Trump has his sun conjunct America's Mars. As soon as I saw that Trump got in, I thought to myself, this is going to be loud. Sun Mars in Gemini, blah, 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 blah. Here we have the mercurial. I didn't say all those things to start off with about the phenomenon of the mercurial trickster rising up through society, the social divide, for nothing. I was pointing to the fact that it came up when Trump got elected, because his sun conjunct America's Mars in Gemini. The forceful mercurial trickster.
So what do you think's going to happen this year then?
Just let me get going. What's going to happen? It's up to you to. I'm giving you all these dates and the archetypes.
What about the impeachment?
Are you going to have it?
But the impeachment's tomorrow. I put that chart at 4 o'clock tomorrow in over there. Right at the very moment, guess where Mars is? If I put solar fire on there, Mars, he got impeached with his sun on Mars. Mars, the transiting Mars, opposition. It's at 21 degrees, 22 degrees of Sagittarius. Tomorrow it'll be at 22 degrees of Sagittarius. Opposition to his sun and on his moon, because he's born on a lunar eclipse. Any wonder, a lunar eclipse? But yeah, and everybody, and I saw it on Facebook, people were saying, well, how come he's impervious to why is Trump not getting done for all these things that he's supposed to get done?
Tell us why.
He's got Regulus rising. He's got the fixed star Regulus rising. I wrote an article way back in 2016 saying that if Trump gets in, and it'll be interesting to see whether or not Regulus does what it normally does, which is protects you. Until you do things wrong.
Well, he's done a few things wrong.
Have a look at Bernadette Brady's book. She says, I think she's got a quote there saying something like, avoid revenge. Because the star is well above us. Stars are like, you know, they're
He's, I mean, a lot of people, I mean, it doesn't look like he's going to get impeached by the Senate.
No, but he's still being impeached. He's
no,
still
tomorrow he'll be found
not
not
be
guilty.
acquitted, but
He'll be
he's still
acquitted is
being
the word.
impeached.
What
Yeah.
about the Jupiter Saturn at the end of this year in December?
Yeah, we're getting there. Just let me get through it. We've got a couple of minutes to go. So then we have, in May, we have a new moon at 2 degrees of Gemini. And so then we have June the 6th, Sagittarius, 15 degrees full moon. So as I said, Venus will go retrograde on the 13th. Trump also has his birthday in there, mixed in here. And so all this Gemini Sagittarius stuff, plus the nodes are going in, that's a big major shift for the nodes to be going into Gemini. Then June the 18th, we have a 14-degree Cancer Mercury retrograde. So it retrogrades back to 5 of Cancer. 14 degrees of Cancer Mercury will station on June the 18th
Serious.
on the fixed star Sirius. And of course, America has their sun at 13 degrees, and I think Sirius was at about 12 degrees. No, 12 degrees when America had its chart in 17.
I'm thinking about where it is.
Because the stars move 1 degree every 72 years.
Yeah.
So again, it's within the orb. It's very tight. It's 1 degree, and so we're going to have that Cancer moon in June. And then the big one, this one here, 0 degrees of Cancer. There it is there. When you get a new moon and you get an eclipse, Sarah cycle 1474 north,
It's an ingress.
on an ingress, on a cardinal 0 degrees, and it's out of bounds.
Oh.
It's out of bounds. You only get out of bounds like every 9 years or 18 years, because that's the nodal cycle, and that's how it kind of goes like this again. The declination of all the eclipses, they go up until they get to the maximum, and then they jump out right on 0 degrees. So this is Australia's chart, and you can see there that Aldebaran is, the nodes on Aldebaran there, because Aldebaran was caught up with, well, that was what I was going to mention too, the Venus, Venus, I think the Venus goes back, I'll talk about that in a minute. But Aldebaran was present in the nuclear deal. But have a look down here, there's the Mars. The Mars has just come from conjunction here with Neptune. Okay, so then we get the Aries ingress, and for Australia, guess what degrees for the Aries ingress is rising?
10 or 9?
Yes, 9 degrees again. Repetitive themes, watch them, they mean something. July the 15th, 13 Capricorn lunar eclipse.
Oh, that's me.
Oh, there you go. 21st of July, 28 Cancer new moon with 9 Gemini rising here for Australia. August the 4th, full moon at 11 Aquarius. 20th of August, 19th of August, 26th Leo new moon. That's on Trump's Mars. Trump has his Mars at 26 degrees of Leo. So that new moon will fall on his Mars.
Which was eclipsed a year or two ago.
That's right, on the total big eclipse. September the 2nd, 10 degrees of Pisces, full moon. Then September the 10th, 28 Aries. Mars stations at 28 Aries. What's Australia's ascendant? 29 Aries. Mars will station on our ascendant.
That's not all
What
five.
does that mean?
What day is that?
Well, I showed what happened, what the fires did with Mars on the July eclipse, 2nd of July, 3rd of July, 2019. And mind you, you can't do anything with those charts until I put them in the FAA journal.
Okay, fine.
It's going
What day?
Private research.
Private research, Kate, but don't make it public or you.
Silent disagree.
Yes. Okay.
What date was that?
The 10th of September, 28 degrees of
Okay.
Aries, Mars will station retrograde. Australia's ascendant. And it will go back to 15 Aries in November. So it's going to retrograde back as Mars retrogrades for how many days? Flip the site down. 72 days. Okay. September the 17th, 25 degrees Virgo new moon. 22nd of September, the Libra ingress. I didn't put a degree there. Oh, because it's 0 degrees. Just cast that chart and have a look at that one. October the 2nd, 9 degrees Aries full moon. October the 14th, we have 11 degrees Scorpio with Mercury retrograde station at 26 of the Libra. Okay, so we have another Mercury retrograde. There's 3 of them, thrice great. So they talk about Mercury. Mercury stations at 26 of Libra. Stations at 11 Scorpio and goes back to 26 Libra via the combustor. The combustor is the fiery way. It's the Milky Way. October the 17th, we have a 23 Libra new moon, and 29 Aries is on the descendant of that. That's Australia's ascendant on the descendant of the new moon of 23 Libra. Who knows what 23 Libra rising is? One of the best stars there is.
Spiker and Arcturus.
Spiker.
Spiker and Arcturus. That's it. You got it. So that's nice.
You've got to wait till September, don't we?
But it's not nice for our ascendant to be, Australia's ascendant to be on the descendant. It's like we're sinking into the abyss.
Is it?
November the 3rd, Super Tuesday, of course, Election Day in America. Mercury stations direct at 25 of Libra. How come they always have a bloody Mercury thing happening in America?
They do.
So yeah, Super Tuesday, November, when Trump probably gets elected again. Well, he's running 65% in the polls.
Yeah.
It's pretty strong. And the way the Democrats, with their Mercury retrograde, Iowa
I know, but
doesn't look.
what's his name doing better than everyone else?
And they're running New Hampshire, they're running the whole lot while Mercury's retrograde in Pisces. It's like Trump's probably sitting there going,
He is, he's been mocking the one.
yeah. November the 30th, Saras 116 lunar eclipse. Watch this date.
September the 30th.
Watch this
November.
date. November. November the 30th. Saras 116 lunar eclipse at Age of Gemini. Ed used to call it the nuclear degree.
Oh.
Reason being, the nuclear stuff, if I had time I'd show you, the nuclear stuff, when the first nuclear reaction was there and when all that, we had Uranus, Mars and Saturn in the 3 nuclear charts, from the first nuclear 1942 and then the first nuclear bomb in New Mexico and then the dropping on Hiroshima. All of those feature Mars, Saturn and Uranus in one of those positions at 8 degrees of Gemini. Okay, so, and remembering the nodes have gone into Gemini, okay? So that's why I'm saying that this really interesting period we're living in, 2020 and through, because if Trump gets back in again, this is a Gemini node. And the Gemini node is going to go over his Uranus, his Sun, and plus all this other Gemini stuff. It's there's some interesting times ahead for the planet.
What was that last day? What was that last day? That new
30th of November.
30th.
December the 15th, 23 degrees Sagittarius, Saras 142, 4 north, 4 south, total lunar eclipse, Mars on the MC of Tehran.
Right.
The ascendant descendant is 20 of Tehran. On that day of that eclipse, the ascendant is 29 degrees of Leo. Mr. Trump has his ascendant at 29 degrees of Leo. Tehran has Mars on the MC.
fluctuating at the end of the year.
Interesting, I looked at that chart, I've got a bit more to look at, but it's kind of, yeah. Then December the 17th, Saturn again makes its last, or its final appearance at 00 degrees of Aquarius. It comes back out of Capricorn and is at 00 degrees. Then on the 19th of December, Jupiter is at 00 of Aquarius. And then on the 21st of December is the Capricorn ingress. And of course, on that day, Jupiter and Saturn conjunct each other. And welcome to the new age of Aquarius. That'll do for
And
now.
that's